The Kavathi Empire had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. Their ships were massive, built from strange crystals that glowed with inner light. When they moved through space, entire planets took notice. They had conquered 17 different alien species, and none had survived to tell tales of resistance. The Kavathi did not negotiate. They did not compromise. They simply took what they wanted. When their fleet appeared at the edge of human space, Admiral Taeyang was the first to see them on his sensors. He stood on the bridge of his warship, the Indomitable, watching the screens light up with red warnings. 200 alien vessels had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Each one was bigger than Earth's moon. Lieutenant Hana sat at the communications station, her hands shaking slightly as she worked. She was young, only 25, and this was her first real crisis. "Sir, they're sending a message," she said. Her voice was steady despite her fear. The main screen flickered to life. The alien that appeared was unlike anything humans had ever seen. Its face was all angles and geometric shapes with eyes that glowed like dying stars. When it spoke, the words came out in perfect English, though the voice sounded wrong, like it was being created by a machine rather than vocal cords. "Human species," the alien said. Its tone was flat, emotionless. "You have been judged. Your worlds will be incorporated into our empire. Your resources will be allocated according to our needs. Resistance will result in the complete extermination of your species. You have one of your solar rotations to comply with our terms." The screen went black. The bridge was silent. Every person there understood what had just happened. Humanity had been given 24 hours to surrender everything or face extinction. Commander Bora broke the silence. She was Taeyang's second-in-command, a woman who had served in the military for 20 years. "Orders, sir?" Taeyang looked at the tactical display. 200 ships. The entire human fleet combined had maybe 300 vessels, and they were scattered across dozens of star systems. Even if they gathered every single ship, the simulations showed the same result. Humanity would lose. "Send the message to Earth Command," Taeyang said quietly. "Let them decide." For 3 days the politicians argued. The unified human nations held emergency sessions that lasted through the night. Some wanted to surrender. They pointed out the obvious facts. The Kavathi were more advanced. They had more ships. They had destroyed civilizations that were older and more powerful than humanity. Fighting was suicide. Others refused to accept slavery. They argued that even if humanity lost, they should go down fighting. At least their children would know they had tried. On Mars, the colonial government voted to fight. On Europa, the council was split down the middle. The outer settlements began evacuating civilians, loading them onto cargo ships and sending them toward the edge of known space. General Minho sat in the war room deep beneath Geneva, watching the debates with tired eyes. He was 70 years old, and he had spent 40 of those years preparing for a war he prayed would never come. He had studied every major conflict in human history. He had run simulations of alien encounters thousands of times. He knew things that the politicians did not know. On the 4th day, he made his decision. He walked into the council chamber without permission, his uniform crisp despite the late hour. The politicians stopped arguing when they saw him. "We will fight," General Minho said. His voice was calm, but it carried authority that made everyone listen. "Not because we can win conventionally, but because I have a plan." The Prime Minister of Earth stood up. "General, we've seen the simulations. We cannot win this." "The simulations assume the Kavathi fight like us," Minho replied. "They don't. They fight like a species that has never lost. That is their weakness." He turned to the holographic display and brought up star charts, fleet positions, and tactical data that made several council members gasp. "We have been preparing for this scenario for 3 years, ever since our deep space scouts detected the Kavathi expansion pattern. We have ships in positions they don't know about. We have weapons they have never seen, and we have something they lack completely." "What's that?" someone asked. "Experience with total war," Minho said. "The Kavathi have fought campaigns of conquest. They have never fought an enemy willing to do whatever it takes to survive. They have never faced an opponent who studied them for years before making first contact." He pressed a button, and new information flooded the screens. Secret shipyards, hidden fleets, weapons that had been developed in classified laboratories. The council members stared in shock. "You did all this without authorization?" the Prime Minister asked. "I did it because authorization would have taken too long," Minho replied. And because I knew that if the Kovathi came, we would need every advantage we could create. I have broken several laws. You can court-martial me later. Right now, you need to decide. Do we surrender, or do we show them what humanity is capable of? The vote took 10 minutes. The result was unanimous. General Minho sat down at the communications console himself. He typed out a message that would be sent to every Kovathi ship simultaneously. It was short, only 13 words. But those 13 words would change everything. Since you chose war, let us show you how it's done. He hit send. The message reached the Kovathi fleet within seconds. The High Archon read it aboard his flagship, the Eternal Glory. Around him, his advisors looked confused. They are refusing? One asked. Do they not understand we will destroy them? The High Archon studied the message. Something about it bothered him, though he could not explain what. The tone was wrong. It did not sound like desperation or defiance. It sounded like confidence. Now send a response, he ordered. Tell them they have made a mistake. But before his communications officer could comply, a second message arrived. This one contained coordinates and a time. 0600 hours. Neutral zone Sigma 7, they want to meet? An advisor asked. They want to surrender in person, another said, to show respect before the end. The High Archon was not convinced. In 3,000 years, the Kovathi had conquered many species. Most begged. Some fought, but none had ever sent a message like that. None had ever sounded so calm. Send a battle group, he ordered. 14 cruisers. If this is a trick, I want enough firepower to handle it. But do not commit the main fleet. Not yet. The orders were transmitted. 14 Kovathi warships broke formation and began moving toward the coordinates. They would arrive at the neutral zone in 6 hours. In that time, humanity prepared. Admiral Taeyang received his orders directly from General Minho. Captain Jiwan positioned her destroyer according to the plan. Thousands of ships hidden in the dark between stars activated their drives and began moving toward predetermined positions. The trap was set. The Kovathi were coming, and they had no idea what was waiting for them. In those final hours before the battle, Taeyang stood alone on the observation deck of his ship. He looked out at the stars and thought about what was about to happen. Humanity was going to war, not a small conflict or a limited engagement. This was going to be total war, the kind that his species had perfected over thousands of years of fighting itself. He wondered if the Kovathi understood what they had started. He wondered if they knew that humans had been killing each other with increasing efficiency for their entire existence. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy had been tested in blood. The Kovathi had experienced conquering. Humanity had experienced surviving. Soon the galaxy would learn the difference. Captain Jiwan watched the clock count down to 600 hours. Her ship, the Retribution, hung in empty space at the exact coordinates humanity had transmitted to the Kovathi. She was alone. One small destroyer against the void. Captain, they're coming, Ensign Deho said from the sensor station. He was barely 22 years old, fresh from the academy. This was supposed to be a peaceful tour. Instead, he was about to see combat. 14 Kovathi cruisers. They're not even in battle formation. Jiwan allowed herself a small smile. They think we're here to surrender. They're being lazy. That's good. The Kovathi ships appeared on the main screen. Each one was at least 5 times larger than the Retribution. Their crystalline hulls caught the light from nearby stars and threw it back in rainbow patterns. They were beautiful in a cold, geometric way. The lead ship hailed them. A Kovathi commander appeared on the screen. Its face was similar to the High Archon's, but the angles were slightly different. The glowing eyes fixed on Jiwan with what might have been contempt. I am War Commander Thexnar, the alien said. You commanded this meeting. 1 ship against 14. This is your response to our ultimatum. Surrender now. If you comply, your death will be quick. Jiwan stood up from her command chair. She straightened her uniform and looked directly at the alien. War Commander Thexnar, I have a message for your fleet. Speak, then die. Look behind you. Thexnar did not move. Primitive deception will not, his words stopped. On his own tactical display, alarms were suddenly screaming. His sensor officer was shouting something in the Kovathi language. The war commander's glowing eyes widened. Behind his fleet, space was tearing open. Not with 14 ships. Not with 100 ships. 4,000 human vessels materialized from nowhere, appearing as if reality itself had cracked and spilled them out. Battlecruisers, carriers, destroyers, frigates, missile boats, electronic warfare ships, medical vessels. Support craft. An entire war machine had been hiding in a way the Kovathi had never seen before. Admiral Taiyang's voice boomed across every communication channel, both human and Kovathi. You wanted war, Thexnar. Welcome to humanity's first lesson. We built our entire civilization learning how to kill each other. We've had 500 major wars, thousands of small ones. We've spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of violence. You just gave us a common enemy. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was colder. Thank you for that. The Battle of Sigma 7 began at 0604 hours. Humanity struck first. The Kovathi had shields that could stop energy weapons. They had armor that could absorb missile strikes. They had point defense systems that could shoot down incoming projectiles. What they did not have was any defense against metal rods accelerated to 40% of light speed. Kinetic kill vehicles were the oldest weapon in space warfare. Take something heavy. Throw it very, very fast. The physics did the rest. When mass moved at relativistic speeds, it hit with the force of a nuclear weapon. The human fleet launched thousands of them in the first 30 seconds. 3 Kovathi cruisers simply ceased to exist. Their shields tried to form, but the kinetic energy was too much. The ships shattered, spreading debris across the battlefield. The other 11 ships scattered, trying to form defensive positions. That was when humanity's second weapon appeared, quantum-entangled warheads. They looked like normal missiles, but they were connected at a subatomic level. When one detonated, all of them detonated simultaneously, no matter where they were. The Kovathi war commander watched in horror as missiles approached from multiple vectors. His point defense systems shot down dozens of them, but he only needed to miss one. A single missile got through and struck a shield generator. The quantum field activated. Across the battlefield, every entangled warhead exploded at exactly the same moment. 4 Kovathi ships, separated by thousands of kilometers, all took damage in the same instant. Impossible, Thexnar whispered. How can they coordinate like this? His tactical officer had the answer, though he wished he did not. They're not coordinating, Commander. It's the physics. Somehow they've weaponized quantum entanglement. The Kovathi tried to fight back. Their crystal-based weapons fired beams of coherent energy that could cut through most materials. They scored hits on several human ships. The frigate Dauntless took a direct hit to its engine section and exploded. 2 destroyers lost their forward sections and began tumbling out of control. But for every human ship that died, 3 more appeared to fill its place, and they were fighting in a way the Kovathi had never seen. Human vessels moved like a school of fish or a flock of birds. They coordinated without apparent communication. When a Kovathi dreadnought focused fire on one target, 4 other human ships would appear in its blind spots. They knew exactly where to shoot. They knew where the Kovathi shields were weakest. They knew which systems to target to cause the most damage. It was as if the humans could predict every move the Kovathi made. That was because they could. For 3 years, human intelligence had been studying every battle the Kovathi had ever fought. They had analyzed 17 different campaigns of conquest. They had built computer models of Kovathi tactics. They had run 1,000,000 simulations. Every move Thexnar made, humanity had already countered in training exercises. Captain G1 coordinated her destroyer with 2 other ships in a pattern they called the Wolf Pack. One ship would bait the enemy. The other 2 would attack from the sides. It was a tactic older than spaceflight, used by submarine commanders on Earth centuries ago. Target their communications array, G1 ordered. If we can blind them, they can't coordinate. Ensign Deho locked weapons. Firing. A burst of electromagnetic energy washed over the nearest Kovathi cruiser. Its shield stopped most of it, but enough got through to fry delicate electronics. The ship went dark for several seconds. In those seconds, 2 other human ships hammered it with conventional missiles. The cruiser's shields failed. The hull cracked. Atmosphere vented into space. Confirmed kill, Deho reported. 5 down. 9 to go, G1 said. Stay focused. Across the battlefield, the pattern repeated. Human ships fought smart. When the Kovathi concentrated fire, the humans scattered. When the Kovathi scattered, the humans concentrated. They used the Kovathi's own strength against them. 3 hours into the battle, Thexnar knew he had lost. He had started with 14 ships. Now he had 3, and all of them were damaged. The human fleet was barely scratched. Oh, they had lost ships, maybe 200 vessels in total. But they still had thousands more. "Retreat," Texnar ordered. His voice was hollow. All ships emergency jumped to the rally point. The surviving Kovathi vessels activated their faster-than-light drives and vanished. Behind them, the human fleet held position. They did not pursue. They did not need to. Admiral Taeyang stood on his bridge and watched the enemy flee. Around him, his crew was celebrating, but he did not join them. Commander Bora approached him quietly. "Sir, we won."
"Why don't you look happy?"
"Because this was the easy part," Taeyang replied. "We had every advantage. Surprise, superior numbers, better tactics. The next battle will be harder. The High Archon now knows we're a real threat. He'll commit his main fleet. How many ships does he have?" "Intelligence estimates 1,000. Maybe more." Taeyang looked at the tactical display where human and Kovathi casualties were listed. "We lost 200 ships today. Against 14 enemies. If he brings 1,000, we'll need to be even better." Bora was quiet for a moment. "Can we win?" "I don't know," Taeyang admitted. "But General Minho has a plan. He always has a plan." At the Kovathi rally point, the survivors of Thexnar's fleet limped into formation. The High Archon was waiting aboard his flagship. When he saw how few ships returned, his luminescent eyes blazed with rage. "Explain," he commanded. Thexnar did his best. He described the ambush, the hidden fleet, the weapons that defied their understanding, the tactics that seemed to predict their every move. When he finished, the High Archon was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "How is it possible? Our technology is superior. Our ships are larger. Our shields are stronger. Technology is not everything, Archon," Thexnar said quietly. His body was damaged, leaking the luminescent fluid that served as Kovathi blood. "These creatures have been perfecting war for their entire existence. Every tactic we know they countered within minutes. It is as if they have fought this battle 1,000 times before." The High Archon did not want to hear this. "We have 1,000 ships. They cannot possibly have more. We will advance on their home system. Earth will burn as an example to the galaxy." The Kovathi fleet prepared to jump. 1,000 warships, the pride of an empire, ready to destroy humanity's homeworld. But as they prepared, another transmission came from human space. This time, the speaker was an elderly woman with kind eyes. Her voice was gentle, almost grandmotherly. "Kovathi Empire, my name is Professor Sumi. I lead human strategic intelligence. You are about to make your second mistake. Your first was starting this war. Your second will be continuing it." She smiled sadly.
"We have studied you.
"For 3 years, we have analyzed every battle you have ever fought. We know how you think. We know how you fight. And we know where you are going next." The High Archon leaned forward. "Our ships are already there, waiting for you." Part 3. The High Archon did not believe the old woman's warning. He terminated the transmission with an angry gesture and turned to his fleet commanders. "Lies, human desperation. They cannot possibly have forces waiting at Earth. We would have detected them." The Kovathi fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel. 1,000 crystalline warships vanished from normal space, traveling through the strange dimensions where distance became meaningless. They would emerge at Earth in less than an hour. The humans would see them coming. The humans would panic. The humans would die. That was how it had always worked. That was how it would always work. Except it did not. When the Kovathi fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel, they were not at Earth. They were somewhere else entirely. A region of space filled with debris. Chunks of metal and rock drifted everywhere. 3 destroyed moons had been turned into a massive field of wreckage that stretched for millions of kilometers. "Where are we?" the High Archon demanded. His navigation officer checked and rechecked the readings. "The coordinates are wrong, Archon. We should be at Earth, but we are in an uncharted system. I do not understand. Our navigation is always perfect." What the Kovathi did not know was that humanity had placed quantum field generators along their approach route. The generators were invisible to normal sensors. They created tiny distortions in space-time, just enough to alter the destination coordinates by a few light years. The Kovathi ships had jumped exactly where humanity wanted them to go, to a killing field humanity had been preparing for 2 years. "Ambush!" someone screamed across the Kovathi command channel. From the debris, human ships emerged. Commander Bora led the second fleet from her carrier, the Steadfast Resolve. She had been waiting here for weeks. Her ships had been hiding inside the larger chunks of debris, powered down, invisible. All ships weapons free, Bora commanded. Execute Plan Anvil. The debris field gave humanity multiple advantages. First, it blocked sensors. The Kavathi could not see where all the human ships were hiding. Second, it provided ammunition. The field was full of dense metal asteroids that could be accelerated and used as weapons. Human ships activated magnetic catapults. Chunks of iron and nickel, some as large as buildings, were thrown toward the Kavathi fleet at incredible speeds. The Kavathi shields tried to stop them. Some succeeded. Many did not. The difference between this and the kinetic kill vehicles from the first battle was scale. These were not refined, manufactured weapons. These were raw asteroids moving slower, easier to track. But there were thousands of them. Tens of thousands. The Kavathi point defense systems could not shoot them all down. A piece of rock the size of a house slammed into a Kavathi battleship at 3% of light speed. The ship's shield flared, held for a moment, then collapsed. The rock punched through the crystalline hull like a bullet through paper. The ship broke apart, spilling its crew into vacuum. Their shields cannot handle simple mass, Bora observed from her command chair. They built their defenses for energy weapons and sophisticated missiles. They forgot about rocks. Lieutenant Minjay piloted his interceptor through the chaos. He had trained for this in simulators for months. Every dodge, every turn, every attack run had been practiced thousands of times. The Kavathi ships were faster, but human pilots knew this battlefield. They knew where the debris was thickest. They knew which paths were safe and which were traps. Blue Squadron, follow me, Minjay commanded. We're going after their command ships. 6 interceptors dove toward the center of the Kavathi formation. Enemy fire lit up the space around them. 2 of Minjay's wingmen exploded. He kept flying. The mission was more important than any individual life. That was a lesson humanity had learned long ago. The Kavathi fleet tried to organize. Their commanders shouted orders. Their ships attempted to form defensive patterns. But they were not trained for this kind of combat. In 3,000 years of conquest, they had always fought in open space. They had always had superior numbers or superior technology. They had never fought in a debris field where sensors were useless and every chunk of rock could be a weapon or a hiding enemy. Humanity, on the other hand, had been fighting in difficult terrain for its entire existence. From jungle warfare to urban combat, to submarine battles beneath the ocean, humans knew how to use environment as a weapon. The High Archon watched his fleet dying around him. In 2 hours, he had lost half his ships. 500 vessels destroyed or disabled. And the humans were barely scratched. They fought from hiding. They used the debris as both weapon and shield. They coordinated perfectly, despite the communications interference. How? He asked aloud. How can they coordinate without communications? His tactical officer had been analyzing human movements. The answer he found was disturbing. They are not coordinating in real time, Archon. They are following a predetermined plan. Every ship knows exactly what to do, exactly when to do it. They practiced this battle before we even arrived. The High Archon felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. These humans had predicted where his fleet would be. They had chosen the battlefield. They had prepared for months or even years. This was not a battle. This was an execution. All ships, emergency jump, he commanded. Anywhere. Just get us out of here. But the human fleet had predicted that too. The debris field was not random. Certain areas contained high concentrations of exotic particles that interfered with faster-than-light drives. The Kavathi ships tried to jump. Most failed. Their drives sputtered and died. They were trapped. A single human frigate approached the High Archon's flagship. It was tiny compared to the massive Eternal Glory, but size did not matter. The frigate had weapons and the flagship's shields were weakening. High Archon, a voice came over the communications channel. Captain Jiwon's face appeared on the screen. You are cut off from your empire. Your communications arrays are destroyed. Your faster-than-light drives are damaged. You are going to drift here while we tell you a story about humanity. The Archon said nothing. His glowing eyes burned with hatred. Jiwon continued as if she were lecturing a student. You have ruled for 3,000 years without challenge. You have forgotten what evolution through conflict means. Humanity spent 10,000 years fighting itself. We have had 500 major wars. Thousands of minor conflicts. We have weaponized everything, atoms, diseases, information. We made killing an art form. She leaned forward in her command chair. Do you understand what that means? Your empire conquered because you had better technology. But we did not win today with better technology. We won with better tactics, better planning, better understanding of warfare. Then how? The High Archon's voice was hollow, defeated. We are better at war than you are, G1 said simply. We always have been. You conquered civilizations that did not know how to fight back. You never faced an enemy that had been preparing for war since before they invented writing. A new transmission interrupted. General Minho's face appeared, broadcasting from Earth to every Kavathi ship and every Kavathi world simultaneously. High Archon, your empire is receiving this message right now. While you fought here, 50 human fleets emerged at every major Kavathi military installation within 200 light years. We have been positioning them for 6 months. The display showed a star map. Red markers indicated Kavathi military bases, shipyards, supply depots. As the High Archon watched, they began to disappear. One by one, human forces were seizing or destroying them. What have you done? The Archon whispered. We have done what you should have expected, General Minho replied. We prepared. Humanity does not start wars, Archon. But when we are forced to fight, we fight to win. Completely. Absolutely. Without mercy or hesitation. He paused, letting his words sink in. Your empire has a choice now. Surrender or we continue. But understand this. We have studied your species for 3 years. We know your biology, your culture, your psychology. We know that you have never had to develop guerrilla tactics or asymmetric warfare or total war doctrine. We know all of those things. We invented most of them. The High Archon looked at his tactical display. His empire was collapsing, not just militarily but structurally. Human forces had not attacked civilian populations, but they had cut off every military resource. Without supplies, without communication, without reinforcements, the Kavathi military was helpless. And there was something else happening. Reports were coming in from Kavathi worlds. The subject species, the aliens that the Kavathi had conquered over the centuries, were watching the human broadcasts. They were seeing the mighty empire defeated. They were seeing hope. On 17 different worlds, conquered populations simply stopped working. No violence, no uprisings. They just stopped. The Kavathi Empire ran on slave labor, and the slaves had decided they were no longer slaves. Impossible, the High Archon said. We control them. We have always controlled them. You controlled them because they had no hope, Commander Bora's voice came through. She had joined the transmission. We gave them hope. We showed them that empires can fall, that tyrants can be defeated. You did not just lose a military battle, Archon. You lost the foundation your entire society was built on. The High Archon sat in his damaged flagship, surrounded by the wreckage of his fleet, watching his empire crumble on every screen. For 3,000 years, the Kavathi had been invincible. In 3 days, humanity had destroyed that invincibility. What do you want? He finally asked. General Minho's expression was hard. We want you to surrender, completely, unconditionally, and then we want you to change. Because if you do not, we will ensure your species never threatens anyone again. The transmission ended. The High Archon was left alone with his thoughts and his failures. Around him, what remained of his fleet drifted helplessly in the debris field, waiting for humanity to decide their fate. Part 4. The war was over in 3 days. Not because every Kavathi ship had been destroyed, but because the Empire had no ability to keep fighting. Human forces controlled every supply line, every military shipyard, every communications hub. The Kavathi military was scattered across hundreds of star systems, cut off from each other and from home. But humanity did something the Kavathi had never seen before. They stopped. Professor Sumi appeared on broadcasts that reached every corner of Kavathi space. Behind her stood representatives from every human colony and culture: African, Asian, European, American, Australian. They wore different clothes, spoke different languages, but they stood together. People of the Kavathi Empire, Sumi began. Her voice was still gentle, still warm. Your leadership chose to threaten us with extinction. In response, we have dismantled your war machine. But we have not attacked your civilian populations. Across Kavathi space, ordinary citizens watched in confusion. They had been told humanity would be easily conquered. They had been told resistance was impossible. Now they were seeing something different. Human warships orbited their military stations, but the cities below were untouched. Not a single civilian building had been bombed. Not a single non-military target had been destroyed. We could have, Sumi continued. Our weapons could destroy your worlds from orbit. We have the power to do to you what you planned to do to us, but that is not who we are. She paused, and her expression became sad. Humanity learned a terrible lesson across our violent history. Victory through genocide is not victory. It is just creating enemies for your children and grandchildren to fight. We have made that mistake before. We will not make it again. In the debris field, Captain Jiwon watched the broadcast with her crew. Young Ensign Daeho spoke quietly. Are we really going to let them survive? After what they tried to do? That's exactly the point, Jiwon replied. We're showing them we're better than they are. Not just at war, at everything. General Minho appeared on the broadcast next. His uniform was clean, his expression serious but not cruel. Kavathi Empire, here are humanity's terms. First, immediate cessation of all hostilities. Second, withdrawal of all Kavathi forces to your original borders before you started conquering other species. Third, release of all subjugated species under your control. Fourth, reparations to those species for the harm you caused. He held up a hand before anyone could object. And fifth, open your archives. We know your empire sits on 3,000 years of records from 17 conquered civilizations. Their art, their history, their knowledge. You erased them. We want it all restored. Every species you destroyed deserves to be remembered. On the eternal glory, the High Archon's advisors argued in frantic whispers. One of them, a Kavathi named Korvash, spoke what they were all thinking. They are not demanding our submission. They are demanding we change everything about our society. That is impossible, the High Archon said. The Empire is built on dominance. Our entire culture is based on being superior to other species. Without that, what are we? A new voice interrupted their discussion. It came from one of the Kavathi worlds, from the communications network the humans had not destroyed. The speaker was not Kavathi. It was a member of the Velani, a species conquered 200 years ago. Then you will find a new identity, the alien said, because we are listening to the humans' broadcast. Every conquered species in your empire is listening, and we are ready to stand with humanity if you refuse their terms. The rebellion spread faster than anyone expected, not with violence, not with weapons. The subjugated species across the Kavathi Empire simply stopped obeying. They stopped working in the factories. They stopped maintaining the infrastructure. They stopped pretending to be inferior. The Kavathi Empire had been built on the backs of 100 conquered species. When those species decided they were no longer conquered, the empire collapsed like a structure with its foundation removed. Admiral Taeyang monitored the situation from the Indomitable. Commander Bora stood beside him, watching the reports flow in. We calculated this, didn't we? She asked. The empire's weakness was never military. It was structural. They were a ruling class completely dependent on subjects who had no hope of freedom. Until we gave them hope. Taeyang agreed. A message to every conquered species in the galaxy. Empires can fall. Tyrants can be defeated. You are not helpless. On Earth, in the deep command center beneath Geneva, General Minho received status reports from every front. No human soldier had been ordered to occupy a Kavathi world. No civilian populations had been harmed. Humanity had won by cutting off the Empire's ability to wage war, and then stepping back. Lieutenant Hana flagged an incoming message. Sir, it's from the High Archon. Personal channel. He wants to speak with you directly. The screen activated. The High Archon looked diminished somehow. His geometric face seemed less sharp, his glowing eyes dimmer. You have won, General Minho, but I must understand. Why spare us? Your message said you would show us how it is done. Is this how humans wage war? With mercy? Minho was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of thousands of years of human conflict. No, Archon. This is how humans end wars. We are very good at killing. You have seen that. But we learned something across our bloody history. Unless you plan to commit genocide, every war creates enemies for the next generation. He leaned closer to the screen. We are showing you something your empire never learned. How to win a war and build a lasting peace. You wanted to see how humans do war. This is all of it. The violence and the wisdom. The killing and the mercy. Because a species that only knows destruction will eventually destroy itself. Minho's expression softened slightly. We almost did. Several times. We do not want other civilizations to make our mistakes. The High Archon was silent for a long time. Finally he spoke. "What happens now?" "Now you rebuild," Minho said. "Not the Empire. That is finished. But your civilization can continue. We will help if you accept our terms. We will provide resources for the transition. We will share technology to help you develop sustainable systems that do not require conquest. But the choice is yours, and if we refuse, then we leave you alone," Minho said. "But the conquered species are free now. They will not go back. Your empire is over whether you accept it or not. The only question is whether you adapt and survive or cling to the past and fade away." The transmission ended. The High Archon sat in his command chair, thinking about 3,000 years of Kavathi history. His entire life had been dedicated to maintaining the Empire. Now that Empire was gone, destroyed in days by a species they had thought primitive. His advisor Korvash approached cautiously. "What will you tell the Council, Archon?" The High Archon thought about the human general's words. About ending wars, about building peace, about learning from mistakes. These were concepts the Kavathi had never considered. They had always believed strength was enough. "I will tell them the truth," the High Archon said finally. "We lost because we never learned to do anything except conquer. The humans won because they learned from every war they ever fought. They learned when to fight and when to show mercy. They learned that true strength is not just the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to know when not to." He stood up, his damaged body aching. "Call the Council. Tell them I am resigning. The Empire needs new leadership. Leadership that can guide us into whatever comes next." Korvash stared at him. "You would give up power?" "I would give up a title that no longer means anything," the High Archon replied. "The Empire is finished, but the Kavathi people can survive. That is more important than my pride." Across Kavathi space, similar conversations were happening. Some resisted. Some clung to the old ways, but most realized the truth. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed it, and they could either change with it or be left behind. Professor Sumi made one final broadcast. This one was directed at the conquered species, the ones who had suffered under Kavathi rule for centuries. "You are free now, not because we freed you, but because you chose to be free. We simply gave you an opportunity. What you do with that freedom is your decision." She smiled. "We hope you will join us in building a better galaxy, one where species cooperate instead of conquer, where differences are celebrated instead of crushed. We are not perfect. Humanity has made terrible mistakes, but we are trying to learn from them. We invite you to learn with us." On the Retribution, Captain Jiwan stood before a memorial wall. Names of crew members lost in the battles were engraved there. 2,000 humans had died in 3 days of fighting. A remarkably small number given the scale of the conflict, but each one mattered. Ensign Diho found her there. "Captain, people are calling us heroes. They say humanity showed the galaxy something incredible." Jiwan touched one of the names on the wall. "We showed them something. But I do not know if it makes us heroes. Heroes do not calculate acceptable losses. Heroes do not plan wars before they start. We did what we had to do and we did it efficiently, but that is not the same as being heroic." "Then what was it?" "Survival," Jiwan said. "And maybe, if we are lucky, a lesson that will help prevent the next war." 3 months after the war ended, the galaxy was still adjusting to the new reality. The Kavathi Empire no longer existed. In its place was the Kavathi Confederation, a loose association of autonomous systems. The High Archon had abdicated as promised. A council now governed, and it included representatives from the species the Kavathi had once enslaved. The transition was not easy. Some Kavathi refused to accept the change. There were protests on the homeworld. Some military commanders tried to rebel, claiming they could restore the empire. But without resources, without support from the conquered species, without the infrastructure that had sustained 3,000 years of dominance, these rebellions failed quickly. Humanity watched but did not interfere. United Human Nations observers were present, but they stayed in the background. General Minho had been clear in his instructions. The Kavathi needed to build their new society themselves. If humanity imposed the solution, it would just breed resentment and create problems for the future. They need to own this, Minho explained during a briefing with the Human Council. We can guide. We can offer advice. But we cannot dictate. That would make us just another empire. And we did not fight a war to become what we destroyed. Professor Sumi traveled to the former Kavathi homeworld as an advisor. She was old now, walking with a cane, but her mind was still sharp. She met with the new Kavathi council and listened to their concerns. "How do we rebuild?" one council member asked. "Our entire economy was based on extracting resources from conquered worlds. Our entire culture was built around the idea that we were superior. Without those things, we do not know who we are." Sumi smiled gently. "Then you have an opportunity that few civilizations get. You can decide who you want to be. Not who you were. Who you want to become." She pulled up holographic displays showing human history. "My species went through something similar many times. Empires fell. Cultures changed. It was painful every time, but it was also necessary. Growth requires letting go of things that no longer serve you." The council members listened. Some looked skeptical. Others looked thoughtful. Sumi continued. "Start with what you value that has nothing to do with conquest. Art, philosophy, science. The Kavathi have 3,000 years of development in those areas. Build your new identity around those things." On Mars, at the newly established Institute for Post-Conflict Studies, researchers were already documenting what had happened. The war between humanity and the Kavathi would be studied for generations. Every tactical decision, every strategic choice, every moment where humanity had to decide between efficiency and morality. Captain Jiwan gave lectures to military officers about the battles. She walked them through the decisions she had made, the plans that worked and the ones that failed. "We won because we prepared," she told them. "We studied our enemy for 3 years before making contact. When they issued their ultimatum, we already knew how they would fight." A young officer raised his hand. "But Captain, some people say it was wrong to prepare for war before the Kavathi even knew we existed. They say we were paranoid." Jiwan's expression was serious. "Preparation is not paranoia. Hope for peace, but prepare for war. That has been good advice for thousands of years. If we had not prepared, humanity would have been destroyed. 2 million people live on this colony alone. They are alive because we took the threat seriously." She paused. "But never forget the cost. 2,000 of our people died. The Kavathi lost hundreds of thousands. War should always be the last option. But when it is the only option, you must be ready to fight with everything you have." At the edge of former Kavathi space, Admiral Taiyang met with representatives from the 17 species that had been conquered. The meeting took place on a neutral station that humanity had helped build. The aliens varied wildly. Some were aquatic, living in water-filled environments. Others were insectoid hive minds. Still others were energy beings that barely had physical form. Despite their differences, they all had questions. The leader of the Velani delegation spoke first. "Why did you help us? You owed us nothing. We were not your allies. We were not even your neighbors." Taeyang considered his answer carefully. "We helped you because we know what oppression feels like. Every human culture has stories of tyranny and freedom. We understand that struggle. And because we are going to share this galaxy, we would rather have neighbors than subjects," Commander Bora added. "And because if we had let the Kavathi continue, they would have eventually learned from their mistakes and become even stronger. It was strategic to stop them now." The Velani representative made a gesture that translated as amusement. "So it was not just kindness. It was also practical." "Everything in war is practical," Taeyang said. "But practical and moral do not have to oppose each other. We won because we were better at fighting. We are building peace because we are trying to be better than war." The representatives talked for hours about forming a galactic council, not a government, not an empire, just a forum where different species could communicate, trade, and resolve disputes without violence. Humanity would have a seat. The Kavathi would have a seat. All the free species would have seats. It was an idea that would have been impossible a year ago. Now it seemed not just possible, but necessary. On Earth, General Minho retired. His last act was to release a complete database of every decision made during the war, every tactical plan, every strategic calculation, every moral choice. He made it available to all species as a warning and a lesson. In his final address to the United Human Nations, he spoke plainly. "We won this war before it started, by preparing for something we hoped would never come. We won it during the fighting by being more ruthless and more creative than our enemy, and we are winning the peace by being more generous than anyone expected." He looked out at the assembled representatives. "But make no mistake, this was humanity showing the galaxy what we are capable of, both the glory and the horror. We are a species shaped by endless conflict. That is not something to celebrate. It is something to understand and control. Minho paused, his weathered face showing his age. The message we sent, "Since you chose war, let us show you how it is done," that was not a boast. It was a warning and a promise. A warning that we know war better than most species, and a promise that we also know how to end it without becoming monsters. We are dangerous. We are strategic. We are capable of violence beyond what the Kavathi imagined, but we are also capable of mercy, of rebuilding, of learning. That combination is what makes humanity both terrifying and, I hope, trustworthy. The galaxy knows what we can do now. Our job is to make sure they also know what we choose to do. The speech was broadcast across human space and beyond. It became one of the defining statements of human philosophy in the galactic community. Years passed. The Kavathi Confederation stabilized. The freed species built their own societies. Trade routes opened between dozens of worlds. The Galactic Council met regularly, resolving disputes through negotiation instead of force. There were still conflicts. Some species tested humanity's resolve. Pirates raided trade routes. Border disputes erupted between neighboring systems, but nothing approached the scale of the Kavathi War. The memory of what happened to the Empire served as a deterrent. Captain Jiwan, now an admiral herself, commanded the border patrol fleet. She was older, grayer, but still sharp. When asked about the war during interviews, she always gave the same answer. We did what was necessary. We prepared. We fought, we won, and then we stopped. That last part is the most important. Professor Sumi lived to be 93 years old. In her final days, she received visitors from across the galaxy. Kavathi who had learned to value peace, freed species who had rebuilt their civilizations, human students who wanted to understand how the war had been won. To all of them, she said the same thing. The war taught the galaxy a lesson, not about human superiority, about the cost of aggression and the value of wisdom. The Kavathi learned that power without restraint leads to destruction. Humanity learned that strength must be paired with mercy. The real victory was not in the battles. It was in what came after. On the memorial station built at the site of the Battle of Sigma 7, the names of every human who died in the war were engraved in stone. Visitors from dozens of species came to pay respects. The monument included a simple message in hundreds of languages. They fought so others could live free. May their sacrifice remind us that war should always be the last choice, and peace should always be the first goal. In the years that followed, the story of humanity's war with the Kavathi became legend. Different species told it different ways. Some focused on the battles and tactics. Others emphasized the mercy shown to defeated enemies. Still others talked about the freed species and their journey to independence. But all versions agreed on the core truth. Humanity had been threatened with extinction and responded by dismantling an empire, liberating dozens of species, and then deliberately stepping back from the power they could have claimed. The galaxy learned that humans were dangerous when threatened, but trustworthy when given the choice. They learned that Earth's people had perfected the art of war over thousands of years, but had also learned when not to use that knowledge. The last transmission from human command, "Since you chose war, let us show you how it is done," became famous across the galaxy. It was studied in military academies as an example of psychological warfare. It was debated in philosophy classes as a statement about civilization and violence. But for the humans who had fought in the war, it meant something simpler. It meant that when pushed, humanity would respond with everything they had. Every lesson learned from thousands of years of conflict. Every tactic developed through centuries of warfare. Every ounce of creativity and determination that came from being a species that had climbed to the top of their world's food chain through intelligence and cooperation. And then, after showing that capability, they would choose peace. Because that was the other lesson humanity had learned. That true strength was not just the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to build. The war was over, the peace was holding, and the galaxy was learning what it meant to have humanity as a neighbor, dangerous if provoked, generous if respected, always watching, always prepared, but always choosing diplomacy first and violence only when no other option remained.